Hi there, and welcome to another episode of African Business Stories, your insight into female innovators and entrepreneurs building and running businesses in Africa. I'm Akego Okoye, and on the show today, we're switching it up a bit. We're going to pause from talking about our amazing female entrepreneurs and focus on our fathers. In honor of Father's Day, we've put together a special series titled Lessons and Legacy. It's a collection of conversations with some of my friends and mentors from around Africa on lessons they've learned from their parents and from experiences and the personal legacies they would like to leave for their children. These were all insightful conversations outside of the boardroom. On this episode of the series, I chat with Dr. Kingsley Moghalu, President and CEO of Sogato Strategies LLC. He spent 17 years working at the United Nations and was a one-time deputy governor at the Central Bank of Nigeria. In spite of all of this, he describes his greatest roles as being a husband and a father. Enjoy. Good evening, Prof, and welcome to African Business Stories. It's so great to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Akego. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we're celebrating Father's Day this weekend, and I'm taking the opportunity to speak to some great men like yourself who I know from across the continent. Just getting a sense of your background, where you're coming from, and what your experience being a father. So I know that you were born in Lagos. You grew up between Europe and Nigeria. And just looking back, I'm just wondering if you can reflect on how that shaped the type of person that you've become.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I must, thank you for remembering the fathers. We very often, celebrate the mothers, but I don't think the fathers get celebrated as much as perhaps we should as well. So I'm honored and flattered. Now, concerning the family background, I actually grew up between Europe, the United States, and Nigeria because my father, when I was born, my father was a foreign service officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lagos. And 2 months later, or 3 months later, we moved to Geneva, Switzerland, on his first posting. And a year later, we moved to Washington, D.C., where we spent another 3-4 years, and then returned to Nigeria as the Civil War was beginning. So most of my life, actually, I grew up in Nigeria.
Okay.
Now, later on in my adult life, I returned to the US for graduate study at the Fletcher School at Tufts University, and then joined the United Nations from there. Now, in terms of the impact of that type of upbringing on me, I think, first of all, I think it gave me a sense of the world, which I carried into, my teenage years. And listening to my father and my mother talk a lot about their experiences in international affairs helped to feed my own natural interest in international affairs. So, and then, of course, you had the internal family dynamic. My father's foreign service career was interrupted by the Nigerian Civil War. He was in the foreign service of the Republic of Biafra, which was the eastern region. But after the Nigerian Civil War, he did not return to the Nigerian Foreign Service. And so there was a certain sense of unfinished business that I always got from him, that, he misses the international career he started off with. And had it not been the tragic events of the Civil War. And so I was the first son. I am the first son and the first child of my parents. And I grew up with this very strong sense of responsibility that they inculcated in me. And I also wanted very much to make my parents proud. I wanted them to be proud of me. I wanted them to feel that all their labors for me and my siblings as parents, were not in vain. So I worked very hard to achieve a lot in my life, but not just for myself, funny enough. There was always at the back of my mind a sense of legacy.
Right.
I felt a sense of carrying my father's torch forward, and that was a big driving force in my life.
Wow, that's very interesting. So which parent do you think influenced you most, and what was the most important lesson that you learned from your parents?
Well, I mean, you have two
Hmm.
parents, most of us, and they influence you in different
Right.
ways because the father and the mother have different roles that sometimes converge, you know. So I would say that, from my father, I got a very strong sense of legacy, as I was saying in the beginning.
Right.
I got a very strong sense that carrying the name of Moghalu or being the son of Isaac Moghalu, meant something beyond myself.
Right.
I got a strong sense of values, especially the value of integrity,
Hmm.
because my father, being a civil servant, was reputed to be a person of integrity.
Right.
And so I got a very strong sense of values that, values matter and you should fall back on them in your life. You should use them to move your life forward and fall back on them in the rainy day. And
Hmm.
that values never disappoint in the long term.
Right.
So that sense I got strongly from my father. Now, from my mother, I got a very strong sense of discipline
Hmm.
because my mother was a loving mother, but a disciplinarian.
Right.
Yes, my father was actually softer than my mother. But, the mothers, at least in our traditional context, spent more time with the children.
Hmm.
So, and she was quite a strong disciplinarian. So from my mother, I got the value of discipline. Train up a child in the way that he or she should grow. And when he or she grows up, he or she will not depart from it.
Correct.
That sense I also got very strongly from my mother, home training.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So from my father, I got the big strategic issues, the legacy, the driving force. From my mother, I got the detail
Right.
of of how you behave.
Hmm.
And of course, my siblings also got a lot of that. Perhaps actually a lot more than me, because I was the first son.
Hmm.
I was treated with a little bit more. I don't know how to say whether it's respect
Yeah.
or, I had a sense that I was almost like a co-parent to my parents, looking after my younger siblings.
Right.
And so my mother, who had, her slippers, was always very available for errant behavior, to meet errant behavior. But I didn't get as much of that as my younger siblings. So, so those are the different ways.
No,
Yeah,
thanks
yeah,
for sharing that. So,
yeah,
you've often described your greatest roles in life as being a father and a husband,
yes,
and what have you enjoyed most about being a father? Because you as well had four children.
yes,
So, well, they're young adults now, I should say.
yes, absolutely,
But what have you
absolutely.
enjoyed about being a father, and what type of values have you sought to instill in your children?
Well, what I've enjoyed most about being a father is sharing love, with my children, loving my children. I have enjoyed, because I grew up with a very strong sense of responsibility. I enjoy, being a father figure to them. I enjoy providing for them. I enjoy my responsibility
Hmm.
as a father to my children. And I've tried to pass on the kind of values that were passed on to me. It's funny that we're having this discussion today
Hmm.
because right now on Twitter, I'm doing a series called Life's Lessons.
Right.
And so after I've posted on Twitter, I now post it on our family forum
Hmm.
for my kids to read. So I'm sort of passing on some important lessons I've learned. The importance of values, never want anything too badly, Because wanting anything too badly can set you up to make mistakes.
Right.
I've taught them that it's okay to make mistakes, but there are some very costly mistakes you should never make,
Right.
Because they're very expensive or because they can come back to embarrass you in the future. So I've taught them, the importance of hard work, the difference between, ambition and daydreaming.
Right.
Yes. And these are lessons I also learned growing up, so I've tried to pass it on to them. And, especially in this time of the coronavirus pandemic,
Yeah.
Everybody's on lockdown. And so we've been for months now at home, all of us, me, my wife, Mary Ann, and all the children. And it's been a wonderful time as a family. I'm very much a family person. So I enjoy spending time with my children, listening to their stories, laughing at some of those stories, and just giving them guidance. Yes.
Thank you so much for that. And just to round up, you mentioned
Sure.
your wife, Marianne. So if she could describe you in one word, what one word would that be?
Well, I'm not sure one word is enough for me. I think I'm quite a bit of a handful, but I can try 2 words.
Okay.
I can say, I think she'll probably say he's loving and he is very dedicated. Yeah. Yes. I'm very dedicated to my family. For me, after God, that's it. I mean, it's the family. They matter to me. One of the lessons I learned from my father, and I try to use it in my life, I did not want to be, quote unquote, a successful person who had a broken home.
Right.
Or a home that wasn't very stable and loving. I didn't think that kind of gap is a complete picture of success. For me, success starts inside, at home, and then outward in the workplace and in other professional things. Some people seek financial success or professional success, but the home front can be very weak. And I try to avoid that, and I'm glad I succeeded.
Thank you so much, Prof. And we wish you a very happy Father's Day.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening. That was one of many conversations in the Father's Day special, Lessons and Legacy. All the conversations in the series are available on my website, www.africanbusinessstories.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on the Apple Podcast app, or the Google Podcast app. And do leave us a review so we know how we're doing. I am Akego Okoye, and you have been listening to African Business Stories.